Hello,
Okay.
this is Deborah Anderson, the Black Woman Animator, coming back to you with another video. And in this video, I have Sidney Clifton. Welcome to my channel.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So, can you just introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. Well, my name is Sidney Clifton, and I am a mom, a producer, a wife, a sister, a daughter, all of that.
Mhm.
Mentor, resource. I am currently employed as the Senior Vice President of Animation and Mixed Media at the Jim Henson Company,
Mhm.
and am a senior consultant with BlkWmnAnimator.
Mhm.
As I mentioned, I'm a mom of four
Mhm.
and a storyteller and have always been.
Nice. So, my first question is, where are you from, and how was it growing up?
Okay, well, I was born in Buffalo, New York,
Mhm.
and my family moved to Baltimore, Maryland when I was 8. So essentially, I grew up in Baltimore.
Mhm.
Um, how was it for me? I was the oldest of 6 kids. So
Whoop.
yes, yeah. So so we had a big family, and my parents had the 6 of us in a span of 7 years. So we were
Oh,
like, yeah, like a bunch
back
of
to back
folk.
to back.
Back to back, yes. Excuse me, back to back. So for me, growing up in the late 60s, early
Mhm.
70s was wonderful.
Mhm.
My mom was a poet and children's book author. My father was a philosopher, activist, community organizer. And so we had, it's almost like the dream upbringing in
Mhm.
an intentionally integrated neighborhood in Baltimore, but also the fact that we had people coming in and out of all walks of life, of all
Mhm.
ages, races, etc. And what they had in common was their um, capacity for curiosity,
Mhm.
creativity, wanting to make a change in the world,
Mhm.
wanting to make a difference, and doing so in front of all these kids. People would bring their families, etc. And it was like the perfect nurturing of
Mhm.
young black and brown minds.
Yeah.
It was amazing, amazing upbringing. Non-traditional, but also amazing.
Yeah, it kind of popped in my mind how I was talking to someone yesterday about how in the animation industry, a lot of people know of each other but don't know each other. And
Right.
so for like different generations to be so purposeful in getting together and like communing, and
Yes.
sometimes like in our industry, sometimes we're just like passing by, like boats passing by, and
Mhm, mhm.
we probably should be more purposeful about like getting together, like the people you like your parents did, and
Yes.
they hung around.
I think so, but I think that, I've seen more intention
Mhm,
recently, even with pandemic, and I think
mhm,
what I found interesting is that shows like this
mhm,
virtual seminars and panels and such really has allowed us to have those, moments of connection, even if we're not, in each other's space. Now, there's nothing like being in each other's space, right?
yeah,
That's just a whole different thing.
mhm,
Being around folk with whom you can just commune and don't have to translate and don't have to explain a lot of stuff. So
yeah,
that's lovely. But I think that I do see the intentionality, and I do see a level of truth and honesty and intimacy that a lot of the online sort of opportunities have given us. So I'm hopeful that we'll remember what has worked for us as a
yeah.
community and continue to do so and find ways to do so however they show up.
So how can you speak to, the artisticness of your mother, the
Mm.
philosophical of your father? Like how did those things kind of combine to make you?
Um, well, I think my mother was creative, from she came here creative. My mother was writing poems since she was 12 years old.
Mhm,
Um, and what She was also a performer in a way. She was also highly intuitive. A lot of people don't know that she was actually a drama major when she went to Howard University.
nice.
And so that sort of gave her, my parents met as actors in a theater group in Buffalo.
Mhm,
My father was also highly intuitive, brilliant man, extremely curious about the world, and extremely committed to the betterment of Black people. And I think I always just say that just because I was the first kid, I just got the double whammy of it.
Yeah.
It just boom. So it kind of came out. At least that's the way it feels.
Mhm.
But I also think that because I was always a watcher, I was paying attention to what was important to them and
Mhm.
how they walked in a room and how they interacted with people and how their passions and creativity showed up, which
Mhm.
for me sort of allowed me, right, that it gave me permission to walk in the world a certain way. It gave
Yeah.
me also support to speak truth in a manner that is resonant and
Mhm.
can be heard. So,
Yeah.
and that's not like I have had to hone that, of course,
Yeah.
but I think just paying attention to how they walked in the world is what kind of made me who I am.
Yeah, I know that like every year or two there's this conversation of like the HBCU versus the PWI experience. And I just, I ended up going to a PWI because I majored in animation, and at the time there
Mhm.
was no HBCU that had a program, and I didn't find out
Right.
about animation as a career until my senior year of high school. So I didn't have that
Oh,
time
wow.
to be like, okay, maybe I could do this at a HBCU.
Right.
But for me personally, in my 20s and then continuing into my 30s, it's like looking back, it was more confusing in my 20s to look back and like, why am I reading Native Son in middle school? And then I figure out like, oh, my father like indoctrinated me. That's why he calls me like Angela Davis. But there's like people who go to HBCUs like, oh man, I took this African American studies class in college and that's why it's important. I'm like, I didn't need to wait till college to learn about
Right.
my people like my father taught me beforehand. So
Okay, yeah.
stop allowing your children to wait till they go to a class
Yes,
to learn
yes,
about their history.
yes, exactly. And that was interesting because as kids, there was this board game called Afro-American History Mystery, and it had little cards with historical figures, and you had to, also if you're competitive, you want to win it, so you want to know
Right.
this stuff. But
Mhm.
also when we were growing up, it was the early days of and the spread of Kwanzaa. So we were
Mhm.
like one of the first families who was celebrating Kwanzaa and knew what the Induzo Saba were and all that stuff.
Mhm.
Um, and it was just, I don't know, it didn't feel like these are lessons. It felt like this is
Yeah.
learning about being alive and who you are, and just really informed some rich tapestry of community. It was just an extension of learning community. Also, I had a sixth grade teacher who was no joke, and Mrs. Thomas was, you knew who you were when you left that class in the sixth grade. So it was just great to that that kind level of culture and history and storytelling, and even
Mhm.
family history storytelling very much alive in
Yeah.
our household. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's this question, some videos like content is, when did you first know you were Black? And
Mm.
unfortunately, a lot of people kind of say like this racist thing, and I'm like, mine is more positive of like my dad teaching me. That's when I knew I was Black, not necessarily when a racist thing happened to me.
Right. Yes.
So
Yes.
I feel like I'm lucky in that instance. If I was to answer the question, it wouldn't be, oh, this white person did this. It would be like,
Hmm.
oh, when I had to, like, my dad got a PhD
Hmm.
from Wayne State University in Detroit,
Oh,
and
right.
he had me and my siblings helping him do his research for his dissertation.
Wow.
And so he
Yes.
would record BET on VHS, like the music videos.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so his dissertation was the representation of Black women in rap music videos. So he had these like
Wow.
categories like Mammy, Jezebel, Sapphire, and so we would have to watch the music videos and like what music video had this what female like rope or something. And so
Wow.
that's
Yes.
what I was doing in like middle school and high school.
Right. Right. Exactly. And it's
So
interesting that like the intentionality of your dad as you describe it, and of my parents. And I think I'm not smart enough, or not informed enough to know sort of when did things change where people started getting away from
mhm,
remembering history. And
yeah,
I understand the instinct to want to forget things that are painful and to not
yeah,
focus on trauma. But I
mhm,
think that even with my mother's book Generations, talking about the family history, and there's murders and trauma and usual often stuff that happens in their families, and the finding from that the triumph through that.
Yeah.
That was the story.
Yeah.
We didn't ignore the story. We
Mhm.
just knew the story and understood what the triumph was, which also for me as a kid, and it sounds like it did for you as well, is gave me a sense of responsibility
Mhm.
to continue that learning and that
Yeah.
understanding and that commitment to whatever our sort of current North Star is, or your personal or
Yeah.
collective North Star might be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what was your journey into the executive side of the business? Like, where did you start and how did you get there?
Okay. Well, I started out being wanting to be a writer. That was my
Mhm.
thing. I was going to want to be a screenwriter, and recognized it took hard work. I was writing since I was a teenager. Back in Baltimore, I remember back in the day sending a half-hour script to Richard Pryor's company at the
Uh-huh.
time, and got like a very nice rejection letter, but still that was like okay, this is the thing that's possible. I knew it was possible because of my mom. So
Mhm.
when I got my first industry job, it was as an executive assistant at Fox Sports Net, and I
Okay. Yeah.
happened to my boss at the time had a friend who was at Fox Kids who was moving over to Film Roman. She wanted an
Mhm.
assistant. She understood that I was interested in development. And because of the writing piece, and then so I went over to work with her at Film Roman
Okay.
and as a coordinator. So working with executives, I found it was interesting because not only do you see sort of you get to meet lots of different kinds of people,
Right.
but you could still be creative in that space as an executive. So coming in and helping find writers, talking to artists, etc. So I
Mhm.
found that I really liked the process.
Yeah.
And it was interesting to me. So essentially that boss stayed at Film Roman for a year. I stayed there for 10, worked my way up from coordinator through executive vice president of creative programming and production. It was a
Mhm.
very long title that I call just give it to Sidney because she'll figure it out.
Right.
I think that was a subtext of it. No, but I really enjoyed it. And I think being able to communicate well with people,
Mhm.
keep people sort of tracked and focused on the task at hand. Also, I think because I started later in the industry, I was a mom already,
Okay.
and had sort of like a strong foundation in my family and who I
Yeah.
was and knew who I was.
Mhm.
So I wasn't really rocked by or distracted by some of the other industry madness. But anyway, so the fact that I was organized, creative, and was excited about the creativity kept me that lane, I guess. Also
Yeah.
allowed me to still be creative, but I think keeping things moving is what I really like. And I found recently, or discovered recently, that I noticed that I love the process as
Mhm.
much, if not more, than the content that is created. Doesn't mean I don't love what I produce, because I really do. I'm really proud
Yeah.
of all of them. But I recognize that the thing that really lights me up about it
Mhm.
is the journey. I
Yeah.
love, development and production and birthing a thing from
Mhm.
its conception through its delivery. When I was a kid, one of the things I wanted to be, I had these two things when I was a teenager, what I wanted to be. Actually three. So it's a
Mhm.
writer, an architect, or a midwife. And I recognize that as an executive, I'm all three of those things.
Mhm.
They show up in different ways.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm living the dream.
Yeah, I feel like in life, you have to realize that the journey is important. I feel like,
Yes, yes.
a lot of people, the end is the more of the concentration, but
Mhm.
most of your life you're in the journey.
Absolutely. Yes. That's what this is.
So you
So
might as well
yeah.
enjoy it.
Yes, yes. And really pay attention to it. And sort of,
Yeah.
be mindful of how you move through it as well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Uh, so what does it mean to be like a producer, an executive producer? Can you define that for people? Because sometimes we don't know what it means.
Sure. And honestly, sometimes it means different things.
Yeah.
So, excuse me. Um, Producer is basically the boots on the ground, day-to-day person who is overseeing and managing and making sure that scripts get written on time, that
Mhm.
assets move from one place to another, that you're maintaining your budget and your schedule. That's
Okay.
primarily line producer, but creative
Mhm.
producers do a lot of the same things. They're
Okay.
very often less concerned with budgets as they are in moving creative assets forward, moving the creative
Mhm.
process forward. An executive producer tends to be in a studio sort of a staff person rather
Mhm.
than someone that's assigned to the production,
Okay.
who's often a contractor. So an executive producer sometimes is a person who's brought the property to the studio,
Mhm.
found the money for the property, is staff at a studio, and sort of is a person who checks in on the production, on the status of it every once in a while.
Mhm.
Um, so it's much less hands-on as an
Okay.
executive producer than a producer usually is.
Okay. Um, can you so for a young person, um, how can a young person learn to read the room when they're making a pitch or a presentation, and like what things could they look out for to maybe
Mm,
pivot during their presentation?
sure. Reading the room is so important. And I think the biggest thing to look out for is um, now, since if we're in person, it's body language. It's seeing if
Mhm.
people are shifting in their chairs. It's
Mhm.
seeing if people break eye contact.
Mm.
Certainly, if someone looks at their watch, that's a bad sign. You need to pivot. You need to wrap that stuff up right quick,
Mhm.
or bring people back into the fold, into
Yeah.
your narrative. And I think one of the things that if you enter into a pitch with the mindset that this is going to be a conversation rather than a presentation and your butt is on the line and like
Mhm.
this is make or break, I think you'll have a much easier time pivoting,
Okay.
because
Mhm.
otherwise then you'll think like, I've lost my place in the PowerPoint presentation. Oh man, now I forgot what I'm going to say because I'm so tracked on this. This is what
Yeah.
it's, this slide comes up. And if
Mhm.
you don't, then you'll get rocked easily. So if you go in, I think, with bullet points about who your characters are, why you love them, a couple,
Mhm.
and if it's a series, a couple of story ideas. If it's a feature, give us a log line, beginning, middle, end. Um, then you'll be fine.
Mhm.
If people, I would encourage people to ask questions. I
Okay.
think if you think you're losing them, if people are shifting, the eye contact is moving. Um, you have to breathe, you know, you have to look at everybody in the eye at least once so that you're
Mhm.
actually engaging with people.
Mhm.
Um, and I think having a sense of humor about the
Yeah.
situation and yourself
Mhm.
is also helpful. I tend to like to, if I feel like I'm faltering during a pitch, I'll just try to make people laugh.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's self-deprecating humor, or I will say, or you name the elephant in the room. Um,
Mhm.
because I have said like, this is just not working, is it? And people, it breaks the tension, and then you
Yeah.
can sort of circle back to what it is people want to know, and you
Yeah.
can then ask what questions do you have?
Yeah.
I think it's not life or death.
Yeah.
It's a pitch, really, and
Mhm.
everybody in there is a human. That's the other
Mhm.
thing to remember. That's like,
Yeah.
this isn't somebody who's going to decide your fate as a human being.
Mhm.
This is somebody just taking a pitch, and they're probably tired, and they probably think about a lot of other stuff.
Mhm.
Um, I think really that's the biggest thing. Remember the humanity of the
Mhm.
folks in the room.
Yeah.
Watch their eyes, watch their body language.
Something I've heard is that you can you go in with a specific thing you want to pitch, but maybe in your back pocket have a couple things just in case they're like, oh, well, this isn't where we're going, or if they kind of give you a hint to where they're going, they're, oh, I got an idea for that. Let me.
Yes. Yes, because when people are also when you're in a room pitching, people are trying to figure out if they want to work with you. So it might
Mm,
not be this thing, but they might find you really intriguing. So it doesn't hurt. I think that is a great idea, great advice to have other arenas in your mind. Doesn't have to be a full second pitch, because that's like, oh, and I got to have two pitches when I go into a room.
yeah,
You don't have to be two pitches. You can
yeah,
and also I think if even if you sort of hint towards something else that you might have in development, or something that you're reading, or anything to come back, leave the
mhm,
door open. Make sure you leave the door open. So ask if you can circle back and send other material. Ask
mhm,
if the door can be open for you. So if you are personable And if you seem excited about the work, even if they're not excited about what you just pitched, I think that's golden. People work with, and this is sort of points back to the old adage that people talk about, it's about who you know. It's about who you know-ish, certainly, but it's also about who you are. And if you're somebody that people welcome into a room and just make people feel better because you're there, that will serve you well. Absolutely.
Yeah, when you're talking about like reading people's body language, I remember I did Toastmasters to get better at public speaking. And if it was about animation or my time in Korea, it was like very interesting. But I remember my second speech was on like how to be a leader. And so I kind of did my research and all that stuff. And I was up there like in my head doing the speech. I'm like, this is so boring. I can't wait to be done with this. I was like, I know this is boring. But luckily, if I were to ever do a pitch, hopefully I'll be more exuberant.
So what did you do when you were thinking
I didn't have the power. I didn't have the wherewithal to like make it more interesting. I just like, let me just finish this. So I don't like, yeah, I realized that like when it's something I'm passionate about, like some people could speak on anything and make it interesting. I have like through Toastmasters, I learned like it has to be something I'm passionate about, or it's going to be so boring. I haven't gotten to that plane where if it's something I find leadership interesting. I've been a leader, but I don't know. It wasn't like a funny story or like something that I've been interested in since I was a child. So it's just like sorry, people in the room.
Yeah.
So how far does your creative input go into production? Like, do you just greenlight a series and like maybe let it like how much can you guide a production?
It really depends, honestly. But like currently at the Jim Henson Company, the projects that I'm overseeing, I have a lot of creative input. But that said, I still approach it from the perspective of I'm the midwife. I'm here to serve the vision of the creative. And if my input makes something better, something more itself, or raises the bar, that's input. Otherwise, you shut up, because very often we've all run into development executives that just have 2 cents just because they have them and they share them. It's like, that was really not helpful, sir, or dear. And so I think that's sort of a early executive tendency to want to say something just so that you're saying something. So and that midwifery, it starts with having a conversation with a creative, and then asking questions. So it's very much like it feels like playing jazz. Like they're saying stuff, and then you're coming back with something, and it might be right, it might be a little off, and then you continue the conversation until you really feel like you're in the groove and you got it. So once you've got it, and they can see that too, there's a sense of trust, so that you can have input on art, on writing, on direction, on character, on all of that in the process. But you have to start with the trust. And that means you, as the executive, have to ask a lot of questions. And you don't come in there acting like, I got this, don't worry. I know exactly what you ask questions. And that's a mistake I've seen a lot of people. I've witnessed times where executive producers have said to the talent, to the creator, just let us do our jobs. We'll handle this. It's like, oh my. Then I did that thing like in the cartoons and the sitcoms where you step back because you know it's about to move.
Like the Homer gift where he goes
right. Exactly. Like, no. And I generally have a poker face, but on those instances, if I'm sorry, I will tend to look at the creative like, that's him. That's him.
Yeah.
like,
And then with the idea of it being jazz, sometimes in jazz, like a bad note isn't always bad. It
right.
can lead to something else.
Yes, exactly, exactly. But then you don't sit there and say like, I hit this bad note.
Mhm.
Dang, don't sit there and wallow in the mistake because it's not a
Yeah,
mistake. As you said, it's a part of the process. So I
yeah.
love that part.
So, okay. So, okay, you've worked with Fox Sports Net, Film Roman, Stars Media, Bento Box, Riot Games, and now Jim Henson. Some projects you worked on: Weebles, Hellboy Animated, Swords of Stones and Blood of Iron, Tripping the Rift,
Mm.
the Black Panther miniseries, Tyler Perry's Medea, Tough Love, Road of Vengeance. Are there any other projects that you've worked on?
The Black Panther for BET. Did you say that?
Yeah.
Okay. Rob Zombie. Did you say that?
No.
Okay. Rob. At Stars, there was a long form animated, limited run animated movie called Rob Zombie's The Haunted Movie of El Superbeasto.
That's a long
That
name.
was- yes, that was it was awesome. I was
Mhm.
actually on maternity leave for a lot of that production, but it was very, very cool. And Rob Zombie was cool
Mhm.
to work with. But also, in my career, I've produced live action
Okay.
limited series. It was a 13 episode series with Maya Angelou in her home in North Carolina. I
Ooh.
produced for the Hallmark Channel.
What
Um,
was that called?
it was called The Celebration Table with Maya Angelou. It has not been seen by public, but again, the process,
Yeah.
life changing,
Yeah.
life changing, absolutely. Um, what else? You mentioned all the other animated things. Yeah, I mean, I've touched lots of different things. Those are the shows that I have, credits on and such. The Eloise series for Stars. I mean, and it's interesting because it's all really eclectic.
Yeah.
Um, which I also love, that's and it all starts with that again, the connection with the creator. Um, that part's just that's what lights me up.
So, what what was your experience like working with like Tyler Perry and working on well, let's just start with Tyler Perry and then you can move to like the Black Panther, like producing that because I think you produced that independently, didn't you? The Black Panther
Actually,
miniseries.
no, that was with BET. So I was
Okay.
brought on as a creative producer. Uh,
So how is it working on these black things? That's what I'm asking.
it, I see a pattern to you. No, it was great. It was
Mhm.
it was awesome, and having the ability to influence also content and design and
Mhm.
voice direction and such. Very interesting. In terms of the Medea's Tough Love, it was a long form animated movie was on DVD. Um, I worked with Mr. Perry only one day when he did his voice direction.
Okay.
When he did his voice work rather, and that was great because there's a thing that Black people do when we come into a room with each
Mhm.
other, and even if we don't know each other, there's a I've talked about it before, and I love this. It's the "I see you" moment, and he was gracious enough to have that, and the same thing with the Black Panther folks. But with him, it was he did his voice work. I was the producer on it, so I was sitting sort of back with the Lionsgate executives, the only other Black person in the room. I
Mhm.
was not voice directing, so the voice director. There were a couple of times when there were direction that was given to him. I thought like that's not going to fly. No, I wouldn't say that way. Um,
Right.
but I was like, I respect you. Do your job.
Mhm.
And Mr. Perry had zero issue with correcting
Yes.
or reminding folk who he was. This is
Mhm.
his character. This is his
Mhm.
project. This is going to happen the way that he envisions it, and
Right.
I loved it. It tickled me.
Yes.
Um, so there's that level of it's the fun of creating creating content,
Yeah.
and also there's just that underlying additional bit of joy of like look at Black folk doing stuff. I mean, that was like so. It's almost like I felt like, one of the old, old grandmas sitting rocking on the porch. There you go. And then with the BET version of Black Panther was a 6-episode animated series, 6 half hours that we did for BET. At that time, Reggie Hudlin, who had written this series of Black Panther comics, was executive producing.
Okay.
And I was myself and another executive producer, Aaron Perry, were brought in by the incoming president of BET, Laretha Jones, to oversee the production. So I came on as a creative producer. Aaron came on as sort of line producer. So that was great. Even though it was already sort of in process, it was also wonderful because there are all these Black folks doing stuff.
Yeah.
And then, it was animated by Titmouse Animation Studios, but from the voice talent to obviously Reggie and the execs at BET, it was great to just see it come to life under our watch.
Yeah.
Maintaining the integrity of the stories that Reggie had written. That was just awesome. And we, when Kerry Washington, Alfred Woodard, Jaimin Hunsu, Jill Scott were all the Black voice talent, and it was just great. Again, this Black folks working is beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. So yeah, it was just amazing. And still, we have those, like, even though these are all people who are working steadily, we still had the ICU moment. I love that. I love that in any production.
Yeah, this is random, but you mentioned Jill Scott. I really liked her detective show. I wish it had got more than one season.
That was great, wasn't it? She's really people. I think people do know how she really can act. I mean, she's really good.
Man.
Yep.
So in your career, what would you consider your superpower to be? I'm guessing you already mentioned it, but what is your superpower?
Wow. I don't know if there's
you could pick multiple.
Can I combine? Okay. Here's what I think they are, and they all go down to that midwife piece where I think I can inspire folks to be excited about the work and to do it well. It's like they telling the mother, okay, breathe, you got this. You breathe, you got this. It's really that, a clear communication. I think because I'm excited about the process, I think that's apparent. I think I'm hope that it's inspiring to others. And then just I don't know, I also work pretty hard. So but I think those are the things, actually. I think I love the process, and I love supporting the process. And then you put organization on top of that, then, that's usually turns out okay.
Yeah. So, what was the biggest breakthrough in your career? Or it could be multiple.
Yeah, let's see. Ones that, gosh. A couple of them that I recall was during my tenure at Film Roman, where this was a year where, I mean, animation there wasn't a lot going on in animation, and reality TV just came and exploded, and everybody was trying to get into that space because it was inexpensive and popular and making money and all that. And that was, I think, during writer's strike, matter of fact. And Film Roman was going through a big turnover, and the CEO at that time, John Hyde, who's now actually I work with, who is co-chairman of the Jim Henson Company, but at the time was my boss, let me know, like, look, there's going to be a lot of turnover here, and we're not going to hire another person in this executive position. Can you handle this? And I said yes. So saying yes was huge. because I knew I had the capacity. I hadn't had the opportunity necessarily, but I recognized that all the pieces of what I'm doing is exactly what he's asking for this role. That's the job description. I can do this. And recognizing that I can do it has been a huge breakthrough. And that same moment has shown up in a couple other places. The second place that came was when I was actually producing the Maya Angelou series. And 2 weeks before we were going to start production, our director dropped out, and she had just some scheduling issues, and she was not going to be able to direct. And sort of scrambling for a director in 2 weeks is not easy or fun. And my line producer at the time, Andrea Kaufman, said to me, "Look, this is your vision. You know this show. You should just direct it." Having never done this before in my life, I was terrified, but I also had an amazing supportive group of a crew, and explained to them, I see this show. So I've not done this before, so I will lean on you to help me do this. But so I said yes again. Life-changing.
Yeah.
Most recently, I was, and before I started my executive position at Jim Henson Company, I was an executive producer at Deluxe Animation Studios, where the producing opportunity for Harriet the Spy came up at the Jim Henson Company. One of my favorite books of all time. And John Hyde, who's at the Jim Henson Company, asked me if I'd be interested in doing that. So it would theoretically mean leaving Deluxe to produce at Henson. And I said, I think I can do both. I said yes. So stepping out in that faith and recognizing that you know how to, like, whatever you don't know, you can ask somebody. You can ask for support, but also recognizing, taking a really critical look at what my skill set was, what anyone's skill set is. And, I didn't just jump into it without analysis, but saying yes and taking those shots. And that has led me to here now, another exciting new chapter in producing animation and mixed media for a company that has a legacy that is unbelievable. So it's always been about saying yes.
Yeah, I feel like in my life, I've always tried to recreate that, because my first job in animation, I always say I accidentally got a job at an animation company in South Korea, because I definitely didn't do it on purpose. But like when I had produced my demo reel and they invited me back up, and then they offered me a job, and because I had came over there as an English teacher, and as an English teacher, like the school pays for your apartment, and pays your bills and stuff like that. So I was going to be working at like a real Korean company, and I was going to have to get my own apartment in a foreign land, and figure all this stuff out. And sitting in that chair with them asking me this question, I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but okay, yes, I do. I'll take the job. And I'm just like, so ever since then, I've tried to like believe in myself so much as that, like, okay, I did it that time, so obviously I can do it again. In different areas. But sometimes you do something, but then you don't believe you can do it again because you're human. But
Exactly. And I don't know if this works for you, but for me, I often sort of like remind myself, like, I've got nothing to lose. What's the worst that can happen? Nobody's going to die. Nothing's on fire. I mean, you get embarrassed. Oh, I mean, been there, done that. We'll do it again. So that's...
embarrassment was a journey for me too.
Oh, really?
Like I went to, when I was in college, I'm like a recovering perfectionist and all these things. So like I had a story, like I don't know, for my junior year, like all of the on-campus apartments looked the same. And I remember I would cut through this one apartment to get to mine. Like I would cut through and then go back. And one day my brain just wasn't working, and I went to cut through, but then I went in the apartment that would have been mine if it was the right building. And so I like went in there, and then there was like these white people like fixing their table, and I'm just like, nope, that doesn't tell me that this is not my apartment. So like I go to where my room would have been, and then I'm like, wait. And so I like started to go
Oh my
out.
God.
Like, are you looking for somebody? I'm like, nope, they're not here. And then I like leave. And
No.
at that time, as a like junior in college, I was like too embarrassed
Yes.
to tell that story. Like it took me years to be able to tell that story because like that's being like telling embarrassing stories is like normal, but it wasn't for me. So that
Yes.
was a journey. Like embarrassment was a journey for me. So now I can
Yes.
tell embarrassing stories, and I'm not like thinking, oh my gosh, I did this, and hours later I'm like, oh my gosh, do they still remember this?
Right. Right. Yeah. No, that's a big one because I think I see that a lot in our industry too, where, rather than, risk embarrassment, risk whatever, that's a difficulty, I think, of being in a somewhat sort of shame-based culture where
Mm,
that's how you keep folk in line.
yeah,
That people are so afraid of that, as if that's
yeah,
an indictment on their entire being, and it's not. It's just, everybody's thinking that, like, hope they don't look over here, don't pick me, that sort of
now we
thing.
got to the point where if I make a mistake, okay, whatever. It's not.
Yeah,
Don't worry.
no.
Um, so how has being Black or a woman impacted you in your career? Like what obstacles or obstacles have been presented by being a minority and an executive?
Mm. Um, I think it's been been more. Uh, I don't know. It depends on who is in the room, honestly,
Mhm.
because I have used it. I have actually leveraged people's racism or bias to my advantage. Um, I
That's a
almost,
superpower.
I, I almost hope you'll underestimate me, right? Please, because then when I come up with something that um, it's interesting that I think is sometimes common sense, people
Mhm.
will say that's brilliant. No, it's not. That's common ass sense. Excuse my French. Um, and because Black don't crack,
Mhm.
very often people don't know how old I am, and they're not going to, which is fine with me. So some of the things I've learned in my experience is just life experience. It's not any sort
Yeah.
of, again, brilliance that's unattainable. Um,
Mhm.
I think that when I've been in rooms where I've had men talk over me, um,
Mhm.
or the standard, I say something doesn't fly, man says it again, then it's brilliant. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and now I've learned enough to point out, like, and that's what I said, but I also will do that for other people. I've been
Yeah.
in rooms where a woman has said something. I was like, actually, that's what she said 5 minutes ago. Just for the record, that it's not original. Okay. And I think that I'm I'm finding far more satisfying is
Mhm.
to advocate for other women and other Black women, Black and brown women,
Yeah.
or people who are not being heard in a
Yeah.
room, in process, etc. And I've also gotten feel like I'm in a place in my career where I can point that out
Mhm.
afterward. I don't necessarily have to attack someone in a room because that's also something that people are expecting.
Yeah.
Um, and I find that we still have to sort of be cognizant of my own body language, my own face,
Yeah.
um, and not. It is exhausting to have to worry about, am I scaring folk? Is this you know is this going to be taken well? Are you going to
Mhm.
understand this? And I think that presentation is everything. So I'm not afraid to speak up and say something about race in a meeting. Um, but I think I've done it now. I think I've gained enough trust where people recognize that my intention for bringing
Mhm.
this to your attention is that
Right.
so you can wake up a little bit
Yeah.
and not make the same mistake and not make me feel some kind of way in a room because you didn't understand or you were ignorant or it didn't matter to you. So I think, back in the past, it's been more about being female than about being Black. I have told the story about, when I was an executive at Film Roman and two producers came in to pitch Sidney Clifton, and you don't really know here, unless you know me, you don't really know who's going to be in the room, who that is.
Yeah.
You would probably do assume it's like an older English gentleman. So, so anyway, I went into the two producers who were white males walked into the conference room. I walked in after they were led to the conference room. I did not lead them there initially, and asked them if they wanted a cup of coffee because I was going to get one for myself because I have good manners. And so they said no, we'll just wait for Sidney. So they're very, dismissive. So I went and got my coffee, came back, sat at the head of the table, and put up my hand and said, "Hello, I'm Sidney." And I saw them. I was tickled. I'm not gonna lie. I was so a little bit like, don't, why didn't someone tell us? She's not a man.
Because you're supposed to treat everybody with respect no matter what.
Right. Damn it. Ah. Did I buy the pitch? Nope. But not because of that, because I'm not spiteful in that way. But it was, respect people in the room. Again, regardless, for heaven's sake, you just don't know.
Yeah, even with the panel I moderated last week, which you were on, I heard commentary from friends who were like commenting on how young I looked, and I mean, I've dealt with stuff because I'm Black and stuff when I'm a woman, but like I've dealt with a lot of stuff because of ageism, and not just because I'm actually young, but because I look 10 to 15 years younger than I actually am.
Right.
And so people think I haven't accomplished anything.
Yes, exactly. It's like
I step into a room and people, I feel like, this is all assumption, but like I feel like people assume I'm a student or something, so they don't ask me any questions about my career. And it's like, I've worked on the other side of the world. I've been a leader in the Urban League movement. I've done a lot of things, but nobody asks me any of it because they think I'm 12.
Yes. No. Yeah. I get that one. Yep. Absolutely.
But even with the coffee thing, I remember even being at two separate companies where, well, one time they asked me to like write notes because that secretary thing, but it actually benefited me. I was in a room with a lot of different companies across the world, and I was like, "Ooh, I'm learning stuff."
Yeah.
And I'm really good at taking notes, unfortunately. But at another company, it was me and a white guy who were like had the same title, and my supervisor was like, "Okay, we're gonna go into this meeting. Who wants to take notes?" And I just was sitting there like, and then he volunteered me. I'm like, "Why can't the white man take notes? Like, why I gotta take notes?"
Oh,
So like, I hate that.
Yeah.
You notice like sometimes in the room, like sometimes women do like throwing the parties but sometimes a man might be passionate about it, but y'all don't ask the men. So
right, exactly.
Probably throw a good office party.
Right, absolutely.
So yeah.
Oh man, yeah. That age one, definitely. Yeah.
I'm just like, So that's why I like, even though I haven't worked at the South Korean animation studio for 10 years, I got to work on Family Guy and stuff. So it's a tactic to mention that so that people can be like, "Oh, I can listen to her now because she's done something."
Wow.
But I'm like, why do I have to use something from 11 years ago?
And so do you end up having to do sort of like a rundown of, here are my credits, boom, 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 boom.
I list my impressive stuff, even with Black people, like, just assume, because we don't be knowing how old we are.
Right.
So I'll be in any room and I just like, so I did this, and they're like, oh, okay, let me listen. Just like, okay, this is ridiculous. But at least I figured it out.
Yeah.
So I remember being a manager at Turbo Squid and having some of my people in some meetings, and they will be intimidated and not provide the knowledge that they were invited
Mm.
to provide? What is the importance of knowing that you were invited in the room for a purpose and the responsibility of that?
Um, it's what it sounds like you're describing also is that whole uh, information as currency thing. And,
Oh, mhm.
I think that very often, I think at the bottom of it is knowing who you are and recognizing that empowering someone with your information doesn't disempower you.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a level of insecurity very often that
Mhm.
um, folk carry much more and hold on to much more tightly than what is the greater good? Why
Yeah.
why am I here? Just as you mentioned, why am
Mhm.
I here, and what is the greater good for me sharing this information?
Mhm.
Um, when people often go into rooms feeling that, excuse me, if I give this information, then there's no more space for me here.
Mm,
You
mhm.
know, um, and I think often laying a foundation. I like to do that in meetings, particularly with people who haven't sort of come together before. So
Yeah.
this is our goal,
Mhm.
this is our agenda, this is how I'm running this, and this
Mhm.
is what you should know coming in and coming out.
Mhm.
And the part of it is like this is how we're going to work together. This is what, and the thing that I think Black women like to do. This is what we're not going to do. And sometimes we have to state that very clearly. This
Yes.
is what we're not going to do. That's important. You know?
Let me be clear.
Yes, yes. But it's the insecurity of feeling that if I give you information as currency and power, if I give you my information, I'm no longer necessary. And I think you have to remind people that they are necessary. You're in this room for a reason, and not because of this one bit of, once you give me that, then you're gone. That's not why you're here.
Additionally, I think it's still insecurity, but there's this idea that even though I was invited to this room, I have nothing to offer. And so I know sometimes
Mhm,
like the people I was managing are doing the work
mhm,
and they're invited to this meeting because they are doing the work. And so they're closer to it. And some of the people above would suggest, not force, but
mhm,
suggest a solution. And it would be behoove the person in the room to be like, okay, no, that's not going to work. This is
mhm.
how, because the person up here is just suggesting just because nobody's talking,
Right.
not because they actually think that's going to work. But
Mhm.
the people closer to the project wouldn't say anything because they're so scared. And it's
Right.
just like, this is why you're in the room to like tell them. And it's intimidating because sometimes I remember like there's a guy who worked there who I can't explain how he was intimidating to, but he wasn't purposely intimidating. He
Mhm.
just personality was kind of like that. But like he likes me. Like when I would go see him, like I would see him at different conferences. He's like, "Hey, Deborah," because I treat him
Uh-huh.
like a human being. Like I don't try to be intimidated by people.
Right.
So,
Right.
but in
But
our industry, a lot of people are intimidated by everybody.
sure. And I get the authority piece, the
Yeah.
intimidation piece. I get the imposter syndrome piece.
Mhm.
I've not had that because I pretty much know who I am. But you know, o- often people feel like I don't even know what I'm doing. I mean,
Mhm.
and that's something I think that I think the more you talk about it, the more people can sort of
Mhm.
resolve through that,
Mhm.
process through it. Um, so I would agree with you. Yeah, that like afraid, and it's like afraid to like you're showing your insecurity, you're showing your feeling imposter syndrome, but also like hoping that nobody finds out. If I keep quiet, nobody will know the secret that I know is that like I really don't belong here.
Yeah.
Um,
And
so
sometimes
yeah,
another person sees more in you than you see in yourself.
100%, absolutely.
So it's like convincing that person, like, you are capable.
Yes, and that's and saying that in a room, I think is so powerful,
Mhm.
to people. So I think that kind of behooves us as, Black female leaders
Yeah.
to do some of that, whether people feel that it's useful or not. Because at the end of the day, I think that's I know for me as a mom also, it's part of what I feel necessary to grow these folks.
Yeah, I know that's something I've had to work on because as a person to myself, I
Mhm.
don't always need that like, I have internal motivation. I don't
Yes.
need stuff from other people sometimes.
Hmm.
But other people need that. And so when I taught a college course at Loyola University in New Orleans, and
Hmm.
I realized that at the end of it, like, I need to encourage these students more because I know what they're doing is awesome. But when you're learning animation, you don't like, there's
Yeah.
no, like, you go to the doctor, so you kind of know, you go to you see a plumber work, so you kind of know you're more closer to those, but nobody knows really about animation intimately like that. So when they're learning it, they
Right.
don't know they're producing good work unless I tell them. And because I don't
Right.
need that, it's hard to remember that other people need that and to do that.
Yes. Absolutely.
So
Absolutely. Yep.
you always have
That's
to
the hard part.
not only operate according to your personality, but the personalities of other people.
Exactly. Exactly. You know, have some empathy and recognize that not everybody has our level of experience or support,
Yeah.
at home,
Mhm.
and in their circles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So not everyone has the confidence to be a change maker in the workplace, but from your experience, what are some key ways that Black animation professionals cannot just sit back but be active in changing the culture of their workplaces? And it could be something like small. What are your
Hmm.
thoughts?
Um, I think small and large. I think being um, vocal
Hmm.
about uh, vocal about some life experience. I think
Hmm.
one of and the example I have is just sort of when I start a new place, I like to have one-on-ones with people with whom I'll be working,
Yeah.
and I ask questions about their lives, and I talk about mine, talk about what's important to me as a creator, as a storyteller, and or executive, um, and making sure that you create the playing field.
Hmm.
I think it's really important to do that, because I think when you go into a culture that it has been established,
Yeah.
changing it requires having connecting with every element as much as you can. Some
Hmm.
places are too big, but at least with your immediate circle of colleagues.
Hmm.
Not everybody's going to want to do that,
Yeah.
but I think if you can do that authentically, the fact that you made the effort
Hmm.
makes a difference.
Hmm.
And then you can start having conversations about and asking a lot of questions. How has this been for you? What are
Hmm.
you up against? I think that it's really important for us as humans, period,
Hmm.
to if you can understand what someone's pain points are,
Hmm.
whether it's in the job or outside of the job, and recognize and share what your pain points are and what is important to you. I
Hmm.
think that breaks down a lot of walls, and starts engendering that trust. So you can have then the conversations or do the things such as um, for every day this month, I have featured in my Zoom as my Zoom background, um, art from a Black artist. And so
Nice.
we have these daily check-ins with
Hmm.
my colleagues and team at Henson, and we and we're like have like Black History moment with Sydney. Now that it's about art and it's fun, but it's
Yeah.
still making a change in culture because people
Yeah.
now have an awareness and people like also it's beautiful art. So
Yeah.
being able to have those conversations. So now conversations about race and art are starting to not be as difficult as they could have been.
Yeah.
So it started with the one-on-one, started with asking questions, asking what people's pain points are, sharing yours, and then in bits and pieces,
Hmm.
coming in and doing some introduction, making sharing more of life and culture. And
Hmm.
then you can have some, being willing to have difficult conversations.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's, it's a process, but it's so worth it. And it
Hmm.
so makes the culture better. Um, it's felt really that's been really satisfying to feel like, making a difference and not just making it better for me, making it better for all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's so cool is that, okay, I teach at a media arts high school in Crenshaw, and so we're on
Hmm.
Zoom. And so I change my Zoom background every day. So
See?
I've been doing this since last semester. So
Yes.
I first started like, okay, my loony, like childhood cartoons, and then I went into doing Black ones, and then at the end of last year, it was like Latino, and I'm like, okay, I'm running out of cartoon stuff. So this semester I've been doing like my childhood TV shows. So like I started with TGIF.
Yeah.
And then, so like it kind of creates a conversation where
Yes.
the students will be like, "Oh, what I recognize that," or "What's that in your background?" And
Yes.
I teach Black and Brown students, so
Mm-hmm.
I remember a couple weeks ago, when I started with TGIF, I was explaining to them what TGIF was, and then I played clips from like Perfect Strangers and like my Family Matters and stuff.
That is
So
awesome.
they're like, "Oh, I'm gonna go find these TV shows."
Oh, that's awesome. That's great. That's
So I'm
great.
like,
See?
"Yes, learn about when it
Yeah.
was quality." So, back in my day. But yeah, it's kind
Yeah.
of sparked the conversation, and now we've been doing professional development on Fridays, and so the lady that comes is like, "Oh, what is it? Oh, that's Blossom. Okay, I'm looking for your background every
Right.
time." So like people look forward to it, and I
Yes.
remember I think I did step by step, and my students was like, is that Boy Meets World?" I'm like, "No, wrong white people." That's what this is for white people.
That is great.
So, can you talk about the Clifton House? What does this project do for you and your siblings?
Sure. Well, the Clifton House is a passion project and legacy project that I established at the house in which I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland. And the quick story is that in 2019, on the anniversary of my mom's passing, I reached out to the owner of the house in which I grew up.
Mhm,
The owner told me that it had gone on the market that day.
mhm,
I decided that it was a sign and that I that I had to be considered a purchaser. So long story short, I did end up buying the house and was initially going to just do sort of like, okay, this is a place for me to stay when I'm in Baltimore, and it's reclaiming the house because my parents had lost it to foreclosure.
mhm,
But then I remembered the way the house was when I was growing up with my siblings and I, and the Clifton House project was born from that. It is we will have art and writing workshops, artist retreats, spaces, development, artistic events at the house. And what it does for myself and my siblings is keep my parents' legacy doesn't. My mother's legacy in particular really isn't going anywhere.
mhm,
But what it also does is keep the legacy of community and creative development alive in that space,
mhm,
in the community, and actually worldwide because of the um, clear advantages and success of virtual learning and workshops.
mhm,
So it's a reclamation project. It's a legacy project. It keeps the house in the family. It's the house in which we grew up, and it was actually the last house in which we were all together, sort of in the same space in really pivotal parts of our lives as
mm,
young folk. Um, and it was a sanctuary for artists and activists and community developers and families of all colors and such in the Windsor Hills neighborhood in Baltimore. The neighborhood is still committed to those same things, and this is uh, this is just almost like a dream come true. This is something that will live on beyond us, hopefully.
yeah,
And it's really that paying respects and marking the legacy of who our parents were and what they were about and what I think their spirits continue to be about.
mhm.
Yeah, give back time. Bottom line.
Uh, so let's see. As a veteran in the animation industry, what have you decided is your purpose in regards to Blackness and Black professionals in animation?
Um, my purpose is, I think, to continue to be a resource
Mhm,
for Black storytellers. Recognizing that not everything has to do. I mean, not everything is. I can't produce everything,
yeah.
but I can connect folk to people who can produce something.
Mhm,
So I'm very clear that part of my job is to be not only the midwife but a connector.
Yeah.
And to be a positive one, to be a truth teller in that space. And what I mean by that is very often I will get pitches from people whose pitches and content is just not ready. It's
Yeah.
not developed well. And I need to be honest enough and courageous enough to say that, even
Mhm.
to a Black person, and
Mhm.
especially to a Black person who's going to either take the suggestions or not, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm committed to the excellence of our work as well. And the excellence is not like on compared to mainstream, but compared to what that story is. Very
Mhm.
clear about not all stories are told the same way, and not all stories have the same um, intention.
Yeah.
But the excellence of the authenticity of that storytelling needs to be there, and I'm committed to that, and to be again a resource for that. For Black executives, it's sort of I call it like being a lighthouse. So like,
Mhm.
this is a mistake I made. Try not to make that one, sort of, and being accessible, really honest about what my experience has been. I am honest about the times I've been courageous and I've not, and the times I've not been courageous.
Mhm.
And I think that all of that is useful information, um, depending on where you are in your career. I think being able to provide that kind of information and knowledge and experience uh, is one of the reasons I'm here.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, just
Have you seen any growth opportunities for Black creators, and what do you hope for the future of animation as far as innovation, storylines, and characters?
um, growth opportunities. I think that are the same for all content creators. That
Mhm.
with streaming and with YouTube and social media, even there are a lot of opportunity. That's the good news. The challenge is also there's a lot of streamers, there's a lot of opportunity, and everybody is making stuff. So it's sort of when YouTube started and social media started, and the what was the metaphor? People like uh, everyone screaming in a giant room, and you really can't sort of see what stands apart.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that I think focus is a part of it.
Mhm.
Um, I think that we have an incredible global opportunity to connect content creators and to network and work together with content creators worldwide on the
Yeah.
continent is really that's exciting to me.
Mhm.
Um, and sort of researching and quietly doing some of that
Mhm.
initial having those initial conversations. Um, um, but I think a lot of it right now is in the discovery.
Yeah.
So I know very often as a creator, we like our goal is to make the thing, as we talked about earlier. But
Yeah.
I think we should also give ourselves or value the conversations with other creators to
Yeah.
decide methodically and strategically what are we going to make, how are we going to make it, who is our audience, and how do we move things forward, rather than I have this idea and I want to do this thing.
Mhm.
That too, but what about the producer in South Africa who has this animated kids series, and how do we put those things together? um, I think being strategic is we need to value that and have more conversations that don't have to bear fruit immediately.
Yeah.
Not that it would anyway, really,
Mhm.
honestly. But there's enough room at a table, and if there isn't, then we can make tables. We can make more than one, and
Yes.
that's the we need to keep that in mind. We don't have to have the sort of scarcity mindset that we've had
Yeah.
very often.
Absolutely. Um, what? Let's see. Okay. If someone was producing a document about you, what things would
Right.
you want them to highlight about your life outside of your work in animation?
Oh gosh. My motherhood, the fact that I
Mhm.
have 4 children.
Mhm.
And it's been a journey. Um, see, um, probably my family legacy, the Clifton House, and um, my actually now just feeling worthy of stepping into that,
Mhm.
which I found interesting, but was, if I'm honest, that's kind of what happened. Let's see, what else? Um, my quiet painting and writing. I'm calling
Mhm.
them hobbies now because I don't do them on a regular basis, and I should. I know. Um, so, um, but also my um, mentoring and young artists, and speaking to artists at art schools all across North America.
Yeah.
That's been really important. Those conversations have been really significant for me.
Mhm.
Um, what else? The fact that I did not go to college,
Nice.
and that for probably I've only been able to say that without trepidation for the maybe like 3 or 4 years. That was one of those. It was one of those like secret things that just
Mhm.
made me feel completely insecure. So when people would
Particularly in
talk,
American society, yeah.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, so that and my scrappiness, I think. um, I think
That's awesome.
yeah, those things. Yeah.
So I would like to give you time to read one of your mother's poems.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I just happen to have a book ready. You know me, Deborah. Okay. Uh, um, this is a poem that my mother wrote, actually, that describes a connection between her mother, herself, and me.
Okay.
And I'm reading it because it connects us in interesting ways, and also is a reminder for me of um, continuing to make the life you want.
Mhm.
Okay, and it's called "I Was Born with 12 Fingers." I was born with 12 fingers, like my mother and my daughter. Each of us born wearing strange black gloves, extra baby fingers hanging over the sides of our cribs and dipping into the milk. Somebody was afraid we would learn to cast spells and our wonders were cut off, but they didn't understand the powerful memories of ghosts. Now, we take what we want with invisible fingers and we connect my dead mother, my live daughter, and me through our terrible, shadowy hands. Ooh, that gave me a chill. Thank you, thank you. No, and that again, that's just sort of the reminder, and that it's not even that you have to do a thing. It's who you
Mhm.
are. It
Mhm.
connects you through that legacy, and it's the reminder and the permission to
Yeah.
make the life that you want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think in particularly, I'm not sure how the different generations experience, but with millennials, there's this concentrating on doing, but I
Mm,
feel like we need to realize is powerful and you're enough in just
yes.
being.
Yes, yes, absolutely. That's actually my mother had a quote said that the universe is not asking us to do something. It's asking us to be something, and that's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, how can people follow you on social media?
Let's see, you can link in with me at Sidney
Mhm.
Clifton. You can uh, let's see, follow me on Instagram at Sidney Clifton. Really
Mhm.
boring. Um, or at Clifton House Baltimore. I have
Mhm.
those two accounts, and find me on Facebook again, Sidney Clifton. All
And
of
I
those
like
places.
Yeah, I would like to thank you for coming and sharing yourself and your career with us. I really appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Yes. And to
Thanks.
everyone out there, like So I Know It's Real, comment and tell me how you feel, subscribe to Seal the Deal, and sign up for post notifications to show your zeal. And I'll see you in the next video. Peace.